control your travel and expenses does provide significant business value. And that's because the spending your employees do on behalf of your company is likely to be the second largest line item of your budget. And to add to that fun fact, it's also the second most difficult OPEX line item for companies to control. That's according to a Forrester report from 350 CFOs around the country. So a few other fun facts there for you on the screen as well. So businesses of all sizes struggle with making sure they're not paying more than they need to for everyday travel and entertainment and employee expenses. And also not to mention the labour costs involved in managing and reimbursing these expenses. And it's not surprising how difficult it is when you think about what happens in the process. So consider, is that not changing there? Wait, see if you can fix that. Consider the road warrior Bob. Bob's a great salesperson, well respected in the business. He has a corporate card and he's not afraid to use it. In fact, it would appear to the finance team that he uses it with absolute impunity. Bob decides which airline he'll fly with, which hotel he'll stay at, and whether or not he'll catch an Uber or a taxi to the airport, and whether or not he'll catch cabs when he gets there or hire a car upon arrival. He'll also decide where he'll go out for lunch with his important guests and whether or not he'll include them on his expense report for better FBT outcomes for the business. Sure, there's a company travel policy somewhere in the organisation which sets out, you know, I must take the cheapest fare of the day for flights, and there's a maximum spend on hotels, and even what the meal allowance is. But Bob's way too busy to read that, even find out where it is. At the end of the trip, Bob's racked up a pile of receipts. Some are in his laptop bag, some are in his wallet, and some are even going through the wash right now. The business needs these expenses submitted as soon as possible. We all know that. We want to close off the month. But no matter which words you choose and how carefully you arrange them into a sentence and how eloquently you deliver them, you're not going to change what happens next, which is probably nothing. But at some point in the future, Bob will actually do his expenses. The manual process begins. He gets out that wad of receipts, opens up Excel and enters line by line the detail of each receipt. Of course, there's missing receipts, receipts that didn't make it through the wash, or are just too old and faded to actually be read. There's a lack of detail because the spend was so long ago and Bob simply can't remember what that receipt was even for. The process is time-consuming and increasingly leads to employee dissatisfaction, not to mention the opportunity for errors in all that data. And for the people in the finance role trying to work with multiple Bobs and their expense reports, well, figuring all that out it's just an art form. And imagine the business leaders and the CFOs trying to control these costs. Well, in most cases, they do one of two things. They seek serenity and try to accept it as something they simply cannot change, or they pull the only lever they have available for T&E, an indiscriminate travel and entertainment freeze or travel and expenses freeze. But the good news is there's a solution to all this, a much better way. You can actually capture spend wherever it happens and whenever it happens. It's something that the finance team can roll out to everyone in the business, one solution for everyone. A solution that is, you know, it's engaging because it's accessible on your mobile phone, possibly on yours right now. And I don't blame you, but in 10 seconds or so, I'm going to get Svetlana to join me and go through a demonstrate of how making it easy for the road warriors will empower your business with visibility and control. Simple to deploy, easy to use, and integrated with your finance system. So I'm going to hand over to Svetlana, who's going to show us how Concur works and give you control of your T&E expenses. So just give us like 30 seconds,
yeah,
Svetlana, and you can jump in and set up your demonstration.
Jump out of this.
So you're going to show us on the mobile phone?
I am, and this is my mobile phone right here. Okay, bit busy. All right, thank you, Ray. Great introduction. So what I'm going to show you here is how Bob can do his job a little bit differently, how he can adopt the travel and expense policy of his organisation without even realising he's doing it. We're going to start with the Concur application. The first thing that you'll notice is when Bob uses his mobile phone, he gets alerted to what's going on around him in terms of pending trips, what expenses he's got to put on an expense claim form. He's also got some reports that he might need to submit, and he may even be an approver of a number of expense reports. But let's start with Bob's trip. Usually he prints his itinerary and also gets maybe his executive assistant to help him with his bookings. But what we have here is an example of his itinerary that's being pushed to him via the Concur application. So he's about to take a trip, and while he plans for that trip, he can relax using his mobile phone and hop in a taxi. And as he hops in that taxi and then prepares to pay for that taxi, he can then take a photo of that taxi receipt. So you should be able to see my phone camera. And this will be the hardest part of Bob's job, is getting that photo. And what we're trying to do is avoid getting Bob to put this receipt into his back pocket, where it will likely fade, disappear, or go in the wash, as Ray mentioned. Not only did Bob catch a taxi, but he also had a coffee. So we're going to get Bob to take a picture of his coffee because he can. Now all I've done there is take a photo of 2 receipts. They're being analysed and they're being put up in the cloud, and they will end up in Bob's expense bucket, so to speak. So what we've got here is no receipts are lost, no receipts are faded, and there is no need for Bob to sit at home or at his desk at the end of the week or end of the month, whatever time he chooses, to complete an Excel spreadsheet or photocopy or sticky tape those expenses. You'll notice that they will appear in his expense bucket, and now what we can do is add them to a claim. So he can choose which of these expenses he wants to add. Or we can go one step further and get these expenses to automatically populate onto an expense report. But just so you're aware, the expense receipt that I took for the taxi, this is the picture, and at the same time the OCR technology was able to capture the fact that it was for GM cabs. It was a taxi fare with an Australian dollar amount and the date and time. So all these things matter because this is the accounting information that will get processed in the back. Now the next thing that happens with Bob is he completes his trip and he can be in a taxi, on a train, on his couch doing his expense report. So what I'm going to show you here is an unsubmitted report that Bob has commenced after returning from his trip to Sydney. Now this report has a red flag. The red flag is actively referencing your travel and expense policy. So Bob doesn't need to know if he's doing the right thing or the wrong thing. He generally would be doing the right thing, but the application is making sure that your travel and expense policy is being activated daily, every time an expense is being claimed. So the red flag here indicates that it's a no-go. So we do work like a traffic light system. We do have yellow flags, which is just a warning, but in this case, we've got a no-go. Our policy says that if we're tracking FBT, we're going to need to put in some attendees. So from my mobile app, I can add attendees. Now, Bob did have lunch with a few business people, and he does do this often. And because we're tracking actuals for FBT, what we're going to do is put in the business managers that he met with. And that way we're capturing the accurate FBT calculation for our organisation. Now once Bob does that, all he has to do is save and the red flag disappears. The next thing that he would do is submit this report. But notice before he does submit the report, if he has paid any of his expenses using his credit card, we have a credit card match to Bob's user profile, and that automatically goes against the actual receipt. So the two are reconciled and there is no need for a central reconciliation of your credit card statements anymore. It happens on the go. Now, just to finish off, I'm going to jump into an FBT report or a type of dashboard based on all the information that we can actually pick up with all these receipts and all that data that we read and captured. Over in the top left-hand corner, we've got an actual calculation for FBT, and if we were to use the 50-50 method in our organisation, it would tell us that we would be out of pocket by about $113,000 if we chose the 50-50 method. But because we're picking up the finite detail on our expenses, we're able to claim the correct amount and save some dollars in that area. Other things that we can see is the fact that we have a top 10 employee spender list and also top expense types. You can pick anything up really if you're capturing it. So at this point, I just want to hand over to Ray. That's the end of the 5-minute demonstration of the application.
How many reports are there in the system now as a sort of a...
We've got close to 300 standard reports.
300 standard reports, and so that dashboard is just pulling from a few of those reports and giving you that.
All the data from the receipt. It's stored in there depending on what your organisation wants to pick up.
You have to switch that over, yeah. Yeah. Was that right? Okay.
All done.
Right. Well, that was a very quick demo. So you could see from Svetlana's demonstration that you have your trips and your itinerary on the mobile phone. You have your expenses that you're taking on the fly, so that you don't have receipts lost in your back pocket and so on. And you have captured wherever you were and whenever you were the data on each of those individual expenses. And the beauty of that is for your organisation, you're able to see in real time what's being spent. And whether it be on a corporate card or whether it be cash out of pocket, as soon as the system's read it, it's available to be reported on. So the accruals report, did you want to say something, Svetlana?
I also forgot to mention that Bob could have approved someone else's expense report if he had a team member on the fly, so he would have approved it.
So you can even do your approvals on there as well, yeah. So but for your accruals report, it just makes life so much easier to wrap up at the end of the month and see exactly what you actually did do and report that. And so for CFOs that need to report to the board in the middle of the next month what the actual figures were for last month, we make that so much more easy. You don't have to go back and make changes to your cash flow forecasts and your P&L and so on. So capturing spend wherever and whenever it happens by your mobile device, coming back to the office, and if you need to use the desktop to do your expenses, maybe you're doing mileage and you're calculating how far you went, all that is available. So it's available on any computer or any mobile phone. So I think that that's probably a fairly high level demonstration, but it gives an understanding of a real life situation where a traveller changes a couple of things, just a couple of things that they do, which makes a massive difference to the organisation back in the head office trying to figure out these costs and so on, and who and where and why we're spending it. And of course that also allows you to do things like look at how much we're spending with hotels and then go to those hotels and negotiate better rates. I mean, right now maybe you go to your travel management company and say how much did we spend and so on, but you're not capturing how much was spent in the restaurant, how much was spent in the car parking and other ancillary costs around a hotel. You're able to go to a hotel chain and say, this is what I spent, here's my report for last year, what can you do for me if we were to channel and funnel this spend through to your organisation? And the same with flights. You know, the company Mila, my wife loves that company. Those guys use Concur, and they were telling me that they were able to look at who was taking flights with a more expensive airline and get them to move to the low-cost carriers, and they saved in excess of 6 figures. So on changing those people over. And then there were some laggards as far as that go, some people that still decided to sort of book directly with the airline and so on. They could actually report on if we were to move those people over from booking direct and going with a more expensive airline and move them to the airline they've done a deal with and the lower cost carrier, they could actually see the amount they could save, which in that instance was 70,000 across a year. So you can do a lot more. That really is actionable data. And I'd love the opportunity to come back and do a demonstration on FBT down the track, because the cost savings that we have given organisations by being able to report the actual numbers around FBT. So with Concur, it's FBT as far as meal entertainment spend goes, but that is a big category. Meal entertainment spend is a big category, as anyone on the phone in finance would know. And being able to report on the actual FBT amount versus the 50-50 method can actually save you a lot of money, like tens of thousands of dollars a year. So it's a big deal, and it certainly is. It certainly can form part of a very strong ROI for organisations.
And Ray, just one last comment. Because it's a mobile application, we are creating an environment where your travel and expense policy, it's a consumable policy, meaning that it's going to get 100% adoption. If they're using the app, then they're adopting your travel and expense policy. But if they're not using that the app, they're going to go in manually and they're going to work around a policy potentially. So you get 100% compliance in that space.
Yeah, that's true. And no matter what system you put in place, if you are actually tracking it this way, I can pretty much guarantee you're going to save a lot of money on T&E, because once it becomes in the system, people feel that they should probably, be careful in what they're spending on. Because if you think about it, once an expense report's approved in Excel, it's filed away. No one's going back and looking at trends and so on. So, look, I think it's probably, it gives you a taste and a flavour for what it is we're talking about, and we'd certainly welcome the opportunity to come and talk to you directly, and you can do that through Nicole and set that up. But I think it's probably a good idea, Nicole, if we move to some of the questions that came through, so that we don't keep people too long.
Yeah, brilliant. I was just about to say that. So yeah, if anyone has any questions, please feel free to type them in either the chat box or the questions box. We have had a couple come through, Ray and Svetlana, so I'm going to sort of read them out because I think that they're very relevant to everyone sort of listening in, and then just get you guys to answer them. So the first one that we had is actually in relation to Uber. So as we all know, Uber is the latest disruptive technology, and what they were sort of saying is that, which is very true as someone who takes Uber quite regularly, is they sort of said, with Uber they email the receipt. So it's very true, you don't get a paper copy of the receipt, it's all emailed. So then if it is emailed, how do they get the receipt to connect with the Concur app? How does that sort of occur?
Great question, and it's I really appreciate the question too, because something I didn't highlight was our connected ecosystem of partners with hotels, with airlines, hire car companies. The vast majority of them are connected to Concur's platform, and Uber's another one. So you can actually connect your Uber account with your Concur account. You can have, I've got a personal Uber credit card in there that I use for my personal trips, and I have my corporate card in there as well, and I can select that one for business trips. But the receipt comes directly into your Concur profile and platform without you doing anything. So you can have that set up going on where there's a direct connection. You can get out of the car, and if it's a business trip, it's already in your expense report. Done. The best user interface available is really no user interface, and that's what we're trying to get to, a situation where the expense report writes itself. So the other alternative, if you do have an emailed receipt from anyone else, you can email that receipt to Concur. So it's just email from your email address to receipts@expense.it, and it'll read it and populate your expense report as well. So really
that
good question.
Sort of relates with another question. So that would then be the same with that, the CommBank, the new pay system they have, and the Apple Pay. That would be the same then with you could request the receipts are emailed instead of printed, and then it would be the same. Right. It would all link across.
Yeah, with those sort of receipts, you can just forward the receipt to receipts@expense.it from your mobile phone, and it just populates your expense report for you. So you're actually building your expense report as you go without really touching it.
Brilliant.
So
and then it sort of saves printing a bit of paper and whatnot. And saves.
That's right.
Awesome. Okay, so I've just had another question come through. So this one is how are transactions cost coded? So example, automatic, or can you manually override them?
Certainly. So particularly with a corporate card, if you've got like an American Express card, then that has a lot more richer data come through to it. So with an American Express card, the system will, in most cases, code it correctly for you because the merchant has some data that comes through to the card system. But if it doesn't, you can certainly select a different code. And what Concur does is we take away all those numbers or whatever other codes you've got, and we just make it business meals or taxi or whatever it might be, the actual word, to make it very easy. And then that maps to your GL codes in your finance system.
And you can change them. So Bob took a taxi and had a coffee. That coffee could have included breakfast, and it was picked up as breakfast, but it may have been lunch instead. So he can change it, and those two categories, breakfast and lunch, might actually be a different cost code behind the scenes. Just depends on how you want to categorize the food. But yeah, he can change that.
Awesome. Okay, cool. So there's that flexibility. All right, so another question we've had is, can the Concur app perform on-the-fly coding? So as your app looks like it codes in the background.
So can I clarify that? On-the-fly coding is because what we show the user is layman's language. We don't show them codes. We show them an expense category or an expense type. So they can, if they take a picture, for example, they've parked their car into a parking lot and they get a dodgy looking receipt. The OCR will read that it's a receipt, but it might not identify the vendor. Okay. So they can select a supplier, and they can also select that it was in fact parking or valet parking or whatever the expense category is that organisation has set up. And that expense category is linked to a general ledger account in the background. So we don't actually show the users the numbers unless they go on their desktop and they want to go and see those numbers. They can do that.
Yeah, they've just clarified and said that they use project and jobs.
Yep. Oh, that's yeah. So explain. So with projects, you can certainly load up the projects into the system, and that user can select which project this relates to, or if you're a law firm, which matter it relates to. And the system's smart enough to know that you might have lots and lots of projects to select from. So you only want to see the projects that you're working on as an individual. So you don't need to see everyone else's projects. The system can be set up so that you just see yours
based on the user profile,
and whether or not it's billable, of course, back to the client. So we have a lot of law firms and accountants that use the system for that process, so that you can get your billing back to the customer right.
Yeah, awesome. All right, so another question we've had is the photo of the receipt compliant with the ATO? So is just taking a photo of it compliant?
Yeah, sure. And the reality is that the ATO is also a customer of Concur, so they're doing it. And what the ATO rule is, so long as the receipt is actually readable, and a normal person or an average person will be able to read the data on it, you can take a photo of it, and that is compliant, and that's available. And we can direct anyone that's concerned to the website of the ATO to show it. But yeah, rest assured that they use it, and so do a number of other government bodies that might surprise you. But yeah, certainly is. And I tell you what, it's actually liberating when you start using Concur and you're throwing away the receipts. It's almost like you feel like you're breaking the law, but no problem.
Yeah, no, and it's very true, because a lot of the time these days the receipts fade so quickly, especially when you've got quite a few of them in your purse or wallet. They just rub together. It's all, they're not meant to last long, so it makes sense that it should be compliant, that you can take a photo of them as
That's
a record of your transaction.
Yeah, we store the image. We guarantee to store it for 7 years, but the reality is we haven't actually deleted any images as of yet. So, and that's with over 30,000 customers around the world as well. So,
brilliant.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we might leave it there, and what we'll do is, like I said, we'll get everyone a copy of the webinar, and I'll also provide some more information, maybe about some of the great questions we had, just to those that have asked and just to everyone, so we sort of cover that basis. So thank you very, very much, Ray and Svetlana and the Concur team for partnering with us and for this webinar specifically, and in taking the time to do it. I'm sure everyone really appreciates it, and we appreciate all the awesome information that we've all learnt and the ease at which you're trying to help us all complete tasks. So thank you very, very much. Brilliant.
Thank you for the opportunity. It's our absolute pleasure, believe me. We certainly love talking about Concur, so anytime.
Awesome. All right. Well, thanks, everyone. I'm going to close the webinar now, and we'll be in contact. Awesome. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Bye.
Good.
Bye.